So, our next part will be mainly on predicting genetic disorders. Genetic disorders. What are genetic disorders? They are health problems caused by one or more abnormalities found in your DNA. They can be heritable or they can be unheritable or non-hereditary. Hereditary means it can pass from mother to the children or father to the children. Non-hereditary means it will not pass from parents to the children. So there is different patterns that these characters pass from one generation to another. The characters may be passed from autosomal chromosomes or either passed from sex chromosomes. Based on that, there are mainly two patterns, autosomal patterns and X-linked patterns. So we will discuss these two types of patterns later. For now, let's move on to what are the different types of genetic disorders. There are mainly three types. Single gene disorders, that means diseases that are caused by mutations in a single gene. Examples include sickle cell anemia, the cystic fibrosis likewise. Then the second group is known as chromosomal disorders. In here, there are no mutations that is occurring on the genes. Instead, there are abnormalities or changes in the structure that happens to the chromosomes. The example diseases include Down syndrome, Turner syndrome likewise. Then there is another group that is called multifactorial disorders. Multifactorial disorders, they involve multiple genes, and not only that, they involve environment as well. So there are different factors that cause the disease. These kind of diseases include heart disease, CVD, cancer. So these includes these kind of diseases. Let's go into each of different types of diseases. So first let's talk about single gene mutations. What is a mutation? Mutation is a change that occurs in a gene. So these kind of disorders that occur in the autosomal genes include sickle cell anemia and thalassemia. Not only that, there are many others, but this is just an example. So there are two ways that autosomal genes can, hereditary diseases can be passed on. One way is autosomal dominant, one way is autosomal recessive. Autosomal dominant means the change happens in the dominant gene in the autosomes. So let's say this is the dominant gene and the dominant gene is changed in mother. So if only one copy of the gene, if the gene is dominant, one copy of the gene is enough to express the disease. So you can see all the children that has at least one copy can get sick. But in contrast to this, if you take an autosomal recessive pattern, in order to get the disease, you need to have two copies because the change happens in the recessive genes, not the dominant gene. In order to get the disease, you need to have two copies. What happens if you just get one copy? Then you become the carrier. Carrier means you have the disease component gene in your body, but you will not get the disease. You can pass that disease to someone next in line, next in your generation. Okay? And examples include sickle cell anemia. So if you talk about sickle cell anemia, these are some of the diseases that commonly occur in Thailand. This is the abnormal hemoglobin, presence of abnormal hemoglobin. Hemoglobin is usually oval shaped, but in sickle cell patients, the hemoglobin looks like a sickle cell. You can see a sickle cell. When you have sickle cell anemia, the red blood cells become very fragile and they are prone to break. So when they break, you will have low number of red blood cells in you. Then you will get the condition known as anemia. In addition to that, there are various symptoms that you can have when you have sickle cell anemia. Another example is thalassemia. Similar to sickle cell anemia, this is also a single gene mutation. This also happens because of the abnormal red blood cells. Then, as I told before, normal red blood cells are oval shaped. But in thalassemia patients, they looks like the structure changes. It looks like a square shaped. So the symptoms also include anemia, fatigue, deformities in the facial structure, and growth delays and pale appearance. So these are some example diseases. In single gene mutations, sometimes the gene mutations occurs in the sex chromosomes. For example, X-linked diseases. That means X-links means the mutation occurs in the X chromosome. If it is occurs, if let's say X-linked recessive, you can see, as I told you before, in order to have the disease, you need to have 2 copies. But since this occurs in the X-linked chromosomes, X chromosome, and the boys only have 1 X chromosome. So the boys, even since they have only 1 X chromosome, they will get the disease. But in girls, in order to get the disease, they need to have 2 chromosomes, 2 copies of the, not chromosomes, the copies of the gene. So if you look at this example, in this example, the father is healthy and the mother is a carrier. That means mother has 1 copy. So mother is not sick, but she carries the disease. So the son always get Y chromosome from mother and healthy X chromosome from mother. Y chromosome from father and healthy X chromosome from mother. Then the son is healthy. This daughter get mutated chromosome, the disease chromosome, disease gene, disease copy from mother and healthy X copy from father. Since she has 1 copy, she acts as the carrier. This son gets Y chromosome from father and the diseased copy from mother. Even though he has just 1 copy, he can get sick because boys don't have 2 X chromosomes. So in single gene mutation diseases, mostly the boys in the families are at high risk. So example diseases include hemophilia and color blindness. So hemophilia is a X-linked recessive disorder. In this disease, it happens like it will not easily clot, the DNA, the blood will not easily clot. So you will bleed a lot, and this is a dangerous situation because if you start bleeding outside, you can patch it, but what happens if you start bleeding inside? You don't know, and it cannot be stopped easily. So that is why it's very dangerous. And another one is color blindness. So why the color blindness is so important? You cannot get driver's license if you have color blindness. What is known as color blindness? You cannot differentiate between red, green and blue colors. Mostly you cannot differentiate between these colors. So this is also a X-linked recessive. So if you are a boy, you are at high risk if your family has these changes in your family. So these are some of the examples of genetic disorders. You can look at it later. And then we will go to the second category, that is chromosomal disorders. In chromosomal disorders, unlike the single gene, there's nothing happens with the genes. Instead, there are abnormalities happens in the chromosomes. If you look at it, usually chromosomes occurs as pairs, but in a children with Down syndrome, the chromosome occurs, the 21st chromosome occurs as 3 copies. That is why the disease is there. This is the Down syndrome, the 3 copies in the 21st chromosome. So it can cause physical growth delays, it can cause different characteristic facial features like round face, large tongue and almond shaped eyes skin that covers the inner eye, cognitive delays. These are some kind of symptoms that you can see. And here you can see some of the other diseases, chromosomal disorders that we find in daily life. The last one is the multifactorial disorder. Multifactorial disorder, as I told you before, these are caused not just by one gene, maybe by several genes. And also, in addition to gene factor, there are other factors like environmental factors. So what are these most common other factors? The first one is the environmental factor, which includes pesticides, the pollution in the cities, those kind of factors. Obviously, genetics is one kind of a factor, mainly the family genetic history. In addition to that, there are behavioral problems like physical inactivity, smoking, which is the main reason for many of the diseases, drinking, drugs. In addition to that, there are metabolic conditions like high blood pressure, high blood sugar,